Well, good morning. It's January 10th, and we are now definitely into winter. It was a little late in coming, and to this point is still pretty mild by UP standards, but it's here. Today we'll be talking about firefighting, El Nino, and words. It all starts right now.
From TV6, this is the Ryan Report. Now here's your host, Don Ryan.
Well, fighting fires is a dangerous and challenging assignment, and our guest this morning has been doing just that for a long time. How has firefighting changed over the years? Are there new challenges firefighters face today? Is there more we can do to keep our homes safe from fires? Those are some of the questions we'll be asking this morning when we talk with Tom Belt, who just retired as the fire chief in Marquette. Chief, welcome to the Ryan Report.
Thanks, Don.
Good to have you here. You know, where did you grow up? Where were you from originally?
I was originally from the east side of Detroit.
Okay. And I understand you started as an apprentice fireman. Where was that assignment?
I did. I started at K.I. Sawyer in 1974.
Okay. Did you have dreams of being a fireman when you were a kid, or is that something that came later?
Yeah, you know, I didn't. I was looking for a job, steady work, and I took the civil service test, and they offered several jobs, and the most appealing to me at the time was the firefighter, because I liked the hours, and it just something about firefighting sparks imagination.
Was all of your service at Sawyer when you were in the Air Force?
Yes, it was. I did just about 20 years at K.I. Sawyer.
Okay. Tell us about being a fireman in the fire hall. You know, when you're waiting for fires, do firemen still cook and do things like that to take care of themselves?
Yeah, they still do, but the schedule has gotten real busy. There's so much when you take a really community risk standpoint. There's so many things that have to be done, and everything from testing the apparatus to testing hoses, and everything runs in cycles. So, well, it used to be kind of waiting around for fires because there were a lot of fires back when I started. It's more of a multidisciplined approach that keeps the crews extremely busy through the day and into the night.
Let's talk about what's gone on in the time that you served as the fire chief in Marquette, because I think it kind of serves to help us understand also how the whole profession maybe is changing.
Sure.
What are some of the changes that you would point to that you feel were important?
Yeah, about the time that I started Marquette as chief, Marquette Fire Department was a traditional fire department, as most were. In fact, the main job was fighting fires. The association the firefighters had was with fighting fires. Gradually that began to change. Really through a risk management strategy, we identified demographics in the city, areas of structure in the city, areas of water supply, access, through a risk management study. And we discovered that we have a lot of areas and demographics and things going on in Marquette that are much higher risk. A good example would be the neighborhood from 4th Street to 7th Street and north of Washington. It's riddled with college rentals. The water supply was weak, and the access was uneasy, and the houses were set upon each other pretty closely. So this is our high fire area, really, all the way up to Fair Avenue. So, we took a multidisciplinary approach. We got the water improved there, and Public Works and the engineering staff did a great job there. We pre-fire planned the neighborhoods, and then, of course, you may or may not remember the rental code ordinance that we put in effect that caused us to do inspections on those properties, especially the college rentals. And when you have kids age 18 to 24, that's an extremely high-risk group to begin with. So we were able to kind of tame that area and get some control from a risk management strategy. But there are also other areas in Marquette, too. One of the other things is that our area of services was pretty much restricted to automobile extrication and firefighting. But the world changes, and we had to change along with it. And so it began to encompass hazardous materials responses. We got into confined space rescue, high-angle rescue, and ended up, of course, with the waterfront safety program in the city of Marquette. We managed the lifeguards, and the firefighters all became certified lifeguards themselves. We practiced ice rescue and became certified in that too. So we went from a traditional fire department in 1994 really to an all-hazard type response unit, dealing with any and all emergencies that occur.
I want to follow up on several of those points. I didn't realize until I was a member of the City Commission that the Marquette Fire Department responds in a number of medical emergencies.
Yes.
And that's an important part of your service. Tell us about that.
Yeah, in 1996, the firemen became EMTs, and we would respond and do first responder type measures, waiting for the ambulance to arrive or concurrently with the ambulance personnel. This last year, we had 9 of our firefighters enroll in the paramedic program. And so we're taking that one step further in that firefighters approximately next August will be certified and licensed paramedics with all the advanced equipment that will be located on the pumpers. And now in Marquette, if you are injured or you have an illness and it's acute, you'll have a fire engine there with trained paramedics within about 3 minutes. That's our response time. And we think that, you know, from a community standpoint, that makes Marquette a very desirable place to live.
It makes me feel good, I know that.
It does. It makes people feel really good and insecure.
And I recall asking you a question one time, why do 2 trucks sometimes respond? And it's because whoever can get there fastest is what you try to do.
Yes, we 2.5, 3 minutes, that's our response time in most areas of Marquette. And a person's had, let's say, a cardiac arrest or a heart attack, I mean, those are seconds that are precious.
Let's go back on that areas in the community that are more prone to fires or more difficult firefighting. Some of the things you pointed out you can change, like maybe improve the water pressure. But obviously you can't change the structures where they are. How do you deal with that? Is it mainly through training?
Training, and we develop different tactics for different neighborhoods. So if you're on the west end of the town where it's primarily post-1960 ranch houses, they're relatively easy fires to fight, and their setbacks are pretty wide between the houses. So you don't have the problem with fire impinging on the house next door or the house in the backyard. You move over to that area that's on Bluff Street, north of Bluff Street, or in the area of West Barrick Avenue, South Marquette, the homes, the setbacks are much closer. So you develop tactics for fighting those fires. Might be a little bit more aggressive, might be careful about the way you ventilate so that you don't catch another house on fire or another exposure. So tactics change for neighborhoods, and tactics also change for the water supply, although mostly it's been improved in the city of Marquette. We identified the weak areas. But also demographics are they the regular people that are working regular jobs and are home at night, or are they college student rentals where, you know, things can be going on, activity can be going on at any time of day or night in there. So.
And of course many communities throughout the UP have these same issues. Mixtures of kinds of construction, you know, built over different periods of time. Not all have university students, of course, but they all have their unique problems.
Yes, we have. Marquette's got a lot of not only historic residences, but also just what we call legacy type housing. So we have housing that was built pre-1950, and typically structures like that don't have fire stops in the walls. So you can get a fire in a basement, it'll go race right up the walls into the attic. Okay. So tactically, again, we apply foam. We do real sane and logical ventilation tactics, and the tactics and the strategy do change neighborhood to neighborhood.
Okay. More questions. We'll get to those in a couple of minutes. Back with more on the Ryan Report after we take this break. Guest this morning is Tom Belt, recently retired as a fire chief in Marquette. You know, talking about maybe changes in equipment and perhaps on the lighter side, I can remember, you know, as a kid and probably as a young adult, you know, when the fire truck went out, the firemen were hanging on the side. You know, at some point somebody got the idea, you know, if we built a cab, they could actually ride in the truck. That has to be an important change.
Yeah, when I started, we hung on the tailboard.
Yeah.
And did it for about 10 years.
Yeah.
But just the safety of firefighters. Firefighters are killed responding and returning from fires also. And then the cab concept came up and the DOT regulations changed.
Yeah, so it was, you know, kind of a simple idea for someone to say, why don't we build a cab for him to ride in? But
it was.
I remember watching those firemen go by hanging on that truck, and, you know. But there have been some other important changes as well. I know breathing apparatus is one thing that was important that came in recently. Tell us about that.
Yeah, when I started, breathing apparatus was also starting, and the equipment was extremely heavy. It was a demand type apparatus, so you didn't have any positive pressure in the mask, so you'd get some smoke in there too. The bottles were cast iron, and you had probably about 45 pounds of equipment on your back, including your turnout clothing and other hand tools that you'd have. So, I mean, the most remarkable thing is that now the bottles and the apparatus that you wear for breathing weighs about half of what it did. The bottles are made out of a Kevlar wrap, you know, fiberglass wrap, and all the other appurtenances that go with them. Everything's been lightened up. It's all positive pressure, extremely safe to use, and our turnout clothing, again, is about half as heavy as it used to be.
Okay.
Used to wear the pull-up rubber boots and the rubber raincoats. Those days are gone.
Okay.
Everything's made of Kevlar and Nomex, and
Okay.
you know, it's really remarkable the way protective gear
So
has
it's
come
not
along.
only lighter, it's also a lot better, I assume.
It is lighter and better.
Let's talk for the people watching. You know, what are the common fires in the home? Maybe we can get to prevention a little bit. What are the most common fires we see in residences in particular?
Yeah, the most common are kitchen fires,
Okay.
and that's you feel safest in your own residence, but that's where you're going to have a fire. Typically, it happens around cooking time, which anybody would guess. The cause of fatal fires can be usually after 8 o'clock at night till about 4 o'clock in the morning, and oftentimes are mechanical, you know, from heating appliances. So we always encourage people to make sure the furnace and any of the power plant inside the home is operating at peak efficiency. But also, unfortunately, still smoking, cigarettes, pipes, tobacco, and you mix that with alcohol, oftentimes that leads to tragedy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, most common to be kitchen, and then most common fatal is careless handling of smoking materials and mechanical plants.
And you say mechanical, so people really should get that furnace probably checked out once a year?
Furnace, the ductwork, the chimney, and make sure everything's firing good, operating at the proper temperatures that they're designed to.
What about wood burning? Is that still an issue?
Yeah, wood burning is not quite as popular as it was years ago, especially with the price of natural gas and fossil fuels way down. But typically when those spike up, or propane spikes up like it did a few years ago, people fire up the wood stoves, and then again, it's a whole different technology. You know, the type of wood you burn, the dryness of the wood, the chimneys, the appurtenances, the drafting units on them, they all should be checked and make sure that they're operating properly.
We often hear that fires are caused for electrical reasons. Are these things that could have been prevented in many cases?
Yeah, typically in a modern home with an electrical panel, the circuit breaking type panel, we see less and less of that. But in the older homes with the bus fuses and the breakers, oftentimes you'll get an overheat that will catch fire before the bus fuse will break or be fused.
Do you feel there's some things that, as you ended your career, that you left undone, that you kind of hoped that you might have gotten done before you left? I know at one time there was talk of a new fire hall in Marquette.
Yes. Well, yeah, definitely. I think once the hospital, the bricks and mortar start going up, the city will probably turn its attention to a new consolidated fire station, and that's 2 to 3 years down the road, I think. I would have liked to have been still on duty to see our younger firefighters graduate as paramedics, so I'll miss that. But yeah, there's several things that are cooking out there that would have been nice to be part of, but there comes a time for everyone to retire too.
And Marquette's, the reason it has 2 fire halls is because a railroad track used to run through the center of town?
Originally that's true, and we went through a big controversy back in 1994 over that, and anytime you close a fire station, it's more emotional than anything.
Right.
But we got through it, and I think everybody realizes train tracks or not, that we'd be much more efficient operating consolidated out of the fire station. And we do have a reservation of property that's down at 7th and Spring Street. It's very near the geographic center of the town, so everybody will be served better, I think, by a consolidated station.
So did you ever dream when you started that assistant or apprentice fireman's job that you'd wind up as a fire chief before your days were done?
I didn't at the time when I started, no. I was looking forward to a good career, but the rank came slowly and steadily, and the responsibility came steadily, and I liked it, and quite frankly thrived on it and enjoyed it.
Any immediate plans for the future?
Our plan is no plan. My wife asked for a year off. We're going to have a year. Go when we want, do what we want, and I'll be chasing the trout quite a bit too.
And you've really gone from a 24-hour-a-day on-call job, so you probably deserve that break.
Yeah, Marquette Chief's job is 24/7, essentially on call all the time.
Well, congratulations on your retirement and your great service. Appreciate your joining us this morning.
Thank you, Don.
Okay, back with more on the Ryan Report after we take this break. Well, now that we know it's real, I want to take just a moment this morning to update a subject we talked about a couple of months ago, and that would be El Nino. There's no question that El Nino is here and affecting weather in the United States. We've had tornadoes in December in Texas, floods in Missouri, and a green Christmas in Marquette. Recently, a NASA spokesman said this year's El Nino shows no signs of waning and that it could rival the biggest one ever recorded in the winter of 1997-98. With that in mind, I thought we could spend just a couple of minutes looking back at a couple of minutes from an earlier conversation with TV6 Chief Meteorologist Carl Bonak when we asked him to tell us, what is El Nino?
El Nino is a periodic oscillation of water, and it's also connected to pressure and wind in the equatorial Pacific. And El Nino, the warm phase, is when the warm water gathers close to the South American coast. And the opposite is La Nina, when there's colder than average water close to the South American coast.
And so that situation alone really affects weather in a big part of the globe?
Right, and it's kind of interesting. You look back, and it was Sir Gilbert Walker right around the turn of the century. He was a British mathematician and physicist. He started looking at the pressure oscillations between Darwin and Tahiti, and he noticed that there was quite a change, and the corresponding weather patterns went along with these changes. And it was called the Southern Oscillation Index, and that is still used as one of the measures of El Nino. So we know, we can look back in the historic records at winters, and we can see and say, oh, that was an El Nino winter.
Do we know what causes this to happen?
You know, that's one thing. What came first, the chicken or the egg? It's a wind oscillation, but it's also a pressure oscillation, and it has to do with warm water. And what causes what, they're still not really clear on that. And as far as predicting it long term, no more than a season or two. That has improved too, but it's still something that's first really, it was back in the 80s that we first found out that it really had more of a global effect on weather. And maybe the 70s, it was 72, 73, there was a strong El Nino.
Okay, what does El Nino mean to us? Hopefully good things.
In general, well,
it depends on where you're coming from, right?
In general, an El Nino points toward a milder than average winter in the upper Midwest and the upper Great Lakes, including the Upper Peninsula. And it really seems to be correlated to the stronger the El Nino, the better chance we have of having a milder than average winter.
Well, as Carl has reported on his nightly weather reports, temperatures in Upper Michigan have been averaging well above normal. We'll see what happens as the rest of the winter plays out, but there's no question that El Nino will be remembered in the winter of 2015-16. I'll be back to talk about words after we take a break. Well, on New Year's Day, Lake Superior State University continued a 41-year tradition by publishing its annual list of words banished from the Queen's English for misuse, overuse, and general uselessness. The list is culled from nominations received from around the world, mostly through the university's website. It's kind of a fun tradition if you don't take it too seriously, although some of the contributors really do. For example, one of this year's words is so. That's spelled S-O. As they explain, so is being overused as the first word in the answer to any question. For example, how did you learn to play the piano? The answer, so my dad was in a classical music club. One contributor says, the word serves no purpose in the sentence, and to me is like fingernails on a chalkboard. Another says, this is tiresome and grammatically incorrect replacement for like or. It's even more irksome. It hurts my ears every single time I hear it. Wow. Maybe these folks are right, but they seem awfully intense about that little two-letter word. Another of their chosen words this year is conversation, as in, you're invited to join the conversation. One of their contributors said, this word has been increasingly used by talking heads on radio and television. Is he talking about me? To describe every form of verbal communication known to mankind. It's replaced discussion, debate, chat, discourse, argument, lecture, talk, all of which can provide some context to the nature of communication. That sounds pretty angry about a word that doesn't sound all that irritating to me. The other words on their list include problematic, stakeholder, price point, secret sauce, break the internet, walk it back, and presser. The last one is meant to be a shortened form of press release or press conference. I do find presser to be a little annoying, but I have my own issues with words and languages, and based on this year's words and the reasons for being on the list, I have to conclude these nominations are being made by a lot of people who are easily aggravated. Now, if anyone had asked me, I think there is a phrase that really should have been on the top of their list. It's a phrase we hear constantly, many times a day, when the television networks and cable news channels are talking about the war against ISIS. We hear it from commentators, from government officials. We've even heard it from the President of the United States. That phrase is boots on the ground. Another way of saying, should we send troops into the war zone? We all understand what they mean, and the phrase does help make their point, but it's become so overused, and beyond that, I think it's inappropriate. I say that because the debate is not about sending boots, but putting men and women in harm's way. My point is not to debate that issue, but let's not camouflage a very serious question with a trite phrase that doesn't really convey what's being considered. The brave men and women, those sons and daughters and fathers and mothers serving us, deserve better than being described as boots on the ground. I'll be back in 2 minutes. About time to wrap it up for another week. I want to thank Tom Belt for joining us to talk about his experiences as a firefighter and Marquette Fire Chief. I want to remind you that this show is also available on the internet. Just go to uppermichigansource.com, click on the Features tab to find us. And I'm always interested in hearing your comments or questions. Just send us an email at theryanreport@chesstv.com. The Today Show is coming up next. I hope you have a great day ahead of you and that you'll join us again next Sunday morning.